You're in your 60s, you did everything right, and you're still working. But nobody warned you that it would feel like this. Nobody talks about what happens if you're still working in your 60s. If you're in your late 50s or early 60s, this is the stuff that nobody's gonna tell you. But these 10 truths you need to hear. Hey, what's up? My name's Jason. Now, quick disclaimer, I'm not working in my 60s. I'm retired and in my 40s. So this video isn't coming from my personal experience of still being in the workforce at that age. But here's where it came from. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with my former boss. Good guy, smart guy. He's still out there, helping car dealerships with their online merchandising. Still grinding, still showing up. And we got to talking about what that's actually like, what it feels like, the stuff that doesn't show up in financial planning articles. And some of what he said just stopped me cold. So I started reaching out to others, people in their 60s who are still working. And I kept hearing the same things over and over. 10 things specifically. Things that, well, nobody else really talks about. Things that don't make it into the here's your retirement checklist videos. So that's what this is. If you're in your 60s and still working, this is for you. If you're in your 40s or 50s and wondering what that stretch feels like, this is for you too. So stick with me. All right, so let me give you the first one right now because it sets the tone for everything else. When you're in your 30s or 40s, you think in decades. I've got 20 years, I'll figure it out in the next 10. I mean, time feels like a resource that you have plenty of. Well, something shifts in your 60s. You stop thinking in decades. You start counting years. And honestly, maybe years feels too generous. It starts to feel more like seasons, summers, Christmases. My former boss said something like, I don't think about retiring in 5 years anymore. I think about how many good summers I have left. And that's a completely different frame. And once that frame clicks into place, everything about work starts to look different. Real quick, if you're someone who's approaching retirement and you feel like nobody's talking about the real emotional side of this, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if it's helping. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear this stuff. All right, let's get to the next one. Here's something that almost everyone I talked to brought up, and most of them said it quietly, almost like they were embarrassed by it. The energy isn't what it used to be. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't want this to sound like I'm saying that people in their 60s can't work. That's not it at all. They can do the work. Most of them are still sharp, still capable, still delivering. But it just costs more now. Think about it like a phone battery. See, when your phone is new, you charge it once and it lasts all day, right? Well, over time, same charge, less output. You're plugging in at noon just to get through the afternoon. And that's what several people described to me. The work itself might not be harder, but recovering from it is. A long week used to mean a chill Saturday and you were fine. Now it might mean most of the weekend. And that recovery time, that's life. And here's the part that actually got to me. A lot of these folks aren't slowing down because they want to. They're pushing through because they feel like they have to, which leads us directly into the next one. But before I get into truth 3, which is really about the financial piece that keeps so many people stuck, a quick word from today's sponsor. Americans over 60 are losing more money to scams than ever before. And they're not the obvious ones anymore. By your 60s, you've got decades of financial history sitting out there. Social security number, credit history, old passwords. That information already exists. The danger is when it ends up in a breach or is unknowingly shared with scammers and then starts being used against you. A neighbor of mine found that out the hard way. He retired, careful with his money his whole life, and someone opened credit lines in his name before he even knew anything was wrong. That's exactly what NordProtect is built for. It monitors the dark web around the clock, scanning for your social security number, email, and personal information, and alerts you the moment that something surfaces so that you can take action before it escalates. It monitors your credit too. So if someone tries to open an account in your name, you'll be alerted so that you can take action. And if the worst does happen, you get a dedicated case manager who walks you through the entire recovery process. Up to $1 million in coverage for eligible identity theft recovery expenses, like legal fees and lost wages, and up to $10,000 in online scam reimbursement for fraud-related losses, which matters when your concern isn't just hackers, but being deceived into sending money through a fraudulent transaction or fake opportunity. Setup is 5 minutes. After that, it just runs. That's the kind of protection that makes sense when you spent 30 years building something worth protecting. Link is in the description. Use my code NORTHFinances for our exclusive offer. Get 79% off North Protect. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, completely risk-free. Okay, so you want to leave, but you can't. Or at least that's what it feels like. And the number one reason that I keep hearing, those two dreaded words, health insurance. You retire before 65, and you've got a gap before Medicare kicks in. If you're in your early 60s, that gap could be 3, 4, maybe 5 years. And coverage on the open market, it's not cheap. It can run hundreds of dollars a month, sometimes over $1,000, depending on your situation, your state, your health history. So people stay. Not because they love the job, not because they're fulfilled, because leaving feels financially dangerous. And that fear, that very specific fear of what if something happens and I'm not covered, keeps people locked in place longer than almost anything else. My former boss talked about this, not in some dramatic way, just kind of matter-of-factly, like it was just the reality of the situation. Oh, I'll probably stay until Medicare. I mean, that was it. No big emotion, just acceptance. And I hear that a lot. People have made peace with staying, not because they want to, but because the math doesn't feel safe. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to tell you what to do here, but I will say this. A lot of people assume that the gap is uncrossable, and they never actually run the real numbers. They never explore what coverage could actually cost them. They just assume, well, it's too expensive. And that assumption keeps them working for years. I mean, many of them don't know that in 41 states, they may even qualify for expanded Medicaid, which would give them basically free health coverage. So that's worth looking into. But here's what that financial feeling does to your daily experience at work. It makes everything else a lot less tolerable. When you're 35 and your manager calls a pointless meeting, yeah, you're annoyed. But you go, you sit there, you nod, whatever. When you're 63, it's different. It's not just annoyance anymore. It's almost physical. Multiple people used words like unbearable or I can't do it anymore. Not because they become difficult people, but because the cost-benefit calculation has completely shifted. Here's what I mean. At 35, that hour-long meeting that could have been an email cost you, well, 1 hour. You've still got decades of hours. Annoying, but survivable. At 63, that same hour hits differently. You're acutely aware that your time is finite. That summer you're counting, you just spent an hour of it sitting in a conference room talking about Q3 KPIs. The tolerance for workplace politics follows the same pattern. The jockeying for credit, the passive-aggressive emails, the micromanagement, none of it's new. But the willingness to just absorb it and move on, that erodes. My former boss, he's been in the car business for a long time. He's seen everything. And he's at the point where he just has no interest in the nonsense. I mean, he does the work, he helps his clients, but the industry politics, the corporate posturing, he's checked out of all that. And honestly, that clarity is one of the gifts of being in that season of life. You know what matters. You've earned the right to stop pretending, the rest of it does too. But here's the thing. That clarity doesn't make leaving easier because it's something that quietly traps a lot of people. This one gets a lot of people, and I talk about it a lot on this channel because it's so subtle that it doesn't feel like a trap while you're in it. It feels like prudence, like responsibility, like good planning. Just one more year to make sure the numbers are right. And then a year passes, and the math still feels a little uncertain. So it's one more year, and then another. I talked to one guy, not my former boss, someone else, who said that he pushed retirement back 4 times over 6 years. 4 separate one more years. I mean, he was 67 by the time he finally retired. He'd intended to retire at 63. 4 years, gone. And he wasn't miserable during those years, exactly. He just didn't do what he wanted to do. He kept waiting for the moment when it would feel perfectly safe, perfectly certain, perfectly right. Well, I'm here to tell you, that moment doesn't come. This is something I feel pretty strongly about, and I talk about it a lot on this channel. Retirement, it's not a math problem that you can solve until the answer is perfect. There's no number that removes all uncertainty. At some point, you have to make a decision with incomplete information, because that's just what it is. And every year that you wait, that's a year that you're not living life that you were working toward. But here's what makes the one more year trap so sticky. It's not just about money. There's something deeper going on, something that's harder to admit. At some point, the math flips. Early in your career, money is the constraint. You work more hours because you need more money. I mean, that trade makes sense. Time is abundant, money is not. In your 60s, for a lot of people, that calculates differently. The mortgage might be paid, the kids are grown, the big expenses are behind you. And money, while still important, always important, is no longer the scarce resource. Time is. And yet, people keep making the old trade. More hours, more income, less life. Not because they thought it through and decided that's the right call, but because that's the pattern. That's what they've always done. It's hard to break a habit that's 40 years old. Several people I spoke to talked about this moment, this realization, where they stopped and thought, why am I still trading the thing that I have the least of for more of the thing that I already have enough of? My former boss is good at what he does. His clients value him. But he's also at the point where he thinks about what he could be doing with that time. Travel, family, just rest, like real rest. Not, I have the weekend rest, but genuine freedom. Look, that tension between financial security and personal freedom, it's at the heart of almost every conversation that I have with people in this stage of life. But here's what I didn't expect to find when I dug into this. The biggest thing keeping people stuck isn't actually the money question. It's a fear that they won't even say out loud. The fear of retiring isn't really about running out of money. I mean, that's part of it. That's the surface level conversation. Do I have enough? But when you go deeper, when you ask the follow-up questions, what comes up is this. What if I get it wrong and I can't undo it? That's the fear. Because retirement feels permanent, irreversible. You walk out that door, you hand over the badge, and that chapter is closed. And for a lot of people, that finality is terrifying. Not because they love their job, but because reversing course feels impossible. What if my healthcare costs more than I planned? What if the market does something unexpected? What if I'm bored? What if I miss it? The unknown is hard, but the idea of making a permanent decision and getting it wrong, that's paralyzing. But here's what I'd push back on, and I've talked about this before. Retirement is way less reversible than most people think. A lot of retirees do some form of work afterward, things like consulting, part-time, passion projects. The idea that you walk out and you can never re-engage with the working world is mostly a myth. What's actually irreversible? Waiting too long. Now, I want to shift here because there's a whole dimension of working in your 60s that has nothing to do with money or fear. It's about how you feel in that environment every single day. And it's something that people almost never talk about honestly. So picture this. You've been in your industry for 30-something years. You know how things work. You've seen fads come and go. You've seen strategies succeed and fail. You have pattern recognition that younger coworkers, they just can't have yet. because it only comes from time, from experience. And you walk into a meeting where a 28-year-old is confidently pitching a strategy that you watched fail in a slightly different form like 20 years ago. That feeling, a lot of people described it as, well, loneliness almost. Not hostility, not bitterness, just this quiet sense of being out of sync with the room. The culture has shifted. The communication styles are different. The references are different. The assumptions about how work should feel are different. My former boss works with car dealers. The automotive industry has gone through a massive transformation. Digital merchandising, online buying. I mean, the whole landscape looks nothing like it did 20 years ago. But he's adapted, and he's good at it. But the environment around him, younger teams, new platforms, different rhythms, it takes energy to bridge that gap every day. And for some people, it's not just the culture, it's the physical setup. Open offices built for people who thrive on noise, constant collaboration, when what you actually need after 30 years is the ability to just focus and work. It's not that the new way is wrong, it's just not designed for you. And navigating that gap every single day quietly adds to the weight of still being there. Which brings up what I think is the most personal truth in this whole list. And it's one that most people won't admit, even to themselves. Think about how you introduce yourself. What do you do? I'm in sales. I work in finance. I'm a dealer trainer. I'm in the car business. For most of us, especially people who've been in the workforce for 40 years, that answer is a big part of our identity. Work isn't just a paycheck, it's status, structure, and a sense of purpose, a social life, a reason to get up with somewhere to be. And retirement means dismantling all that at once. And I think that this doesn't get talked about enough. When people plan for retirement, they plan for the money, the budget, the withdrawal strategy. What they almost never plan for is the self. Who are you when the title is gone? Seriously, think about that for a second. Because that question is behind a lot of the hesitation that people feel, even when the finances are fine. I've heard from people who retired and felt genuinely lost in the first year. Not because they were broke, but because they didn't know who they were without the job title. Didn't know what to do with an unstructured Tuesday. And I think this quiet existential thing is one of the hidden reasons that people stay working longer than they financially need to. Because as long as you're still in it, you still are something. You still have a role, an answer to what do you do? And leaving that behind takes more than a financial plan. It takes a whole different kind of courage. But here's the honest truth. You don't figure it out before you leave. You figure it out by leaving, by being in it, by bumping into the discomfort and working through it. And my former boss hasn't gotten there yet. He's still in the car business, still showing up. And I wonder sometimes how much of that is financial and how much of it is this question of who he is on the other side of it. But I saved one more for last, and it's the one that's most out of your control. This one, nobody wants to talk about. And I get it, it's uncomfortable. But almost everyone I spoke to mentioned it. The health stuff starts showing up. Not necessarily catastrophic, not necessarily scary, but persistent, consistent. Things that didn't used to be issues are now just part of the regular maintenance of being alive. A knee that flares up after a long day on your feet, back issues that make the commute miserable, fatigue that doesn't lift the way that it used to, prescription costs that quietly add up month after month, and these things start to intersect with work in ways that are hard to ignore. You used to be able to push through, power past it. Well, I'll just rest in the weekend. But the body has its own timeline now, and it doesn't always negotiate. My former boss, still moving, still active in his work, but he thinks about his physical energy differently now, as a limited resource in a way that it didn't used to. You don't have unlimited reserves. You have to be thoughtful about what you spend them on. And here's the sobering part. Health is one variable that you genuinely cannot predict or control, which means that waiting for the perfect time to retire carries serious risk, because your health, it may not wait, my friend. There are people who spend years saying, one more year, and then retire right into a health crisis that steals the freedom that they were saving up for. And that's not meant to be dark. It's just real. And it's one of the strongest arguments that I know for not letting this drag on forever. Look, here's what this all comes down to. Working in your 60s isn't just a financial situation. It's a full emotional experience. And most of the people living it feel like they're navigating it alone because nobody talks about this stuff honestly. The time pressure is real. The energy cost is real. The feeling of being financially stuck is real. The identity question is real. All of this is real. And if you're in that season right now, I just want you to know you're not alone in any of it. What you're feeling, it's not weakness. It's not failure. It's just honest. What I hope this video does is give you a little more clarity, a little more permission to name what's actually going on. And maybe, just maybe, nudge you to actually run the numbers, have the conversations, and stop waiting for perfect. Because there's a whole life on the other side of this decision, and it's worth fighting for. If this resonated with you, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video connected with you, I think you're really gonna like my other video titled, My Real Advice to People Still Working After 60, It's Time to Retire. I think it hits different after everything we just talked about. I'll leave a link down below. Thanks for watching, my friend. I'll see you in the next one.